Today I would like to invite you to listen to the Dhammapada of the Buddha Shakyamuni. 171st verses from the Buddhist scriptures on the YouTube channel Thien Thai in the USA. Come, behold this world which is like unto an ornamented royal chariot, wherein fools flounder, but for the wise there is no attachment. During the time of the Buddha, there was a wealthy merchant who spent his entire life collecting luxuries, decorating his home, and chasing reputation. He believed that beauty, wealth, and status were the true meaning of life. One day, he met an elder disciple of the Buddha who simply observed the merchant and said that life resembles a royal chariot, beautifully decorated, yet constantly moving toward decay. The merchant was shocked when shortly after, he lost much of his wealth due to unforeseen events and realized how quickly conditions change. At the same time, a humble monk who witnessed the same events remained peaceful, showing no attachment or despair. The Buddha later explained that fools are trapped by appearances, while the wise see through them and remain free. This is the meaning of seeing the world as a royal chariot that fools cling to but the wise do not grasp. Dear friends, this teaching of the Buddha reveals the nature of worldly appearances. The world appears beautiful, attractive, and full of promise, yet it is constantly changing and cannot be held. When the mind clings to appearances, suffering arises. When the mind understands their changing nature, freedom arises. The Buddha does not deny the beauty of the world, but he points to its impermanence. The ornamented chariot represents how life is decorated with experiences, emotions, relationships, and possessions. Yet all are in motion and cannot be possessed. Dear friends, there was once a young nobleman who believed that happiness could only be found through power and influence. He spent years pursuing political position and social admiration. However, each time he achieved a goal, satisfaction quickly faded and new desires arose. One day he encountered a monk who asked him whether he had ever observed how quickly joy turns into dissatisfaction. This question deeply disturbed him. He began to reflect and noticed that every achievement was temporary, like decoration placed on a moving chariot. Gradually he turned inward, seeking stability not in external success but in awareness. Over time his mind became calmer and less dependent on changing conditions. Dear friends, the Buddha's teaching invites us to observe directly how attachment forms. When we see something beautiful, the mind creates desire. When we encounter something unpleasant, the mind creates aversion. Both reactions bind us to the same cycle of suffering. The wise person, however, observes without grasping. They see beauty without being trapped by it, and see impermanence without fear. This is the meaning of non-attachment taught in this verse. Dear friends, another story tells of a dancer in a royal court who was admired by many. She believed her beauty and fame would last forever. One day she fell ill and could no longer perform. Her admirers disappeared, and she experienced deep sadness. Later she met a nun who explained that external beauty is like decoration on a chariot, constantly changing and never stable. The dancer reflected deeply and realized she had built her identity on something impermanent. She then turned to spiritual practice and found a peace that did not depend on appearance or approval. Dear friends, in daily life we are constantly surrounded by ornamented chariots. Wealth, technology, relationships, achievements, and even thoughts appear beautiful and meaningful, yet they are all in motion. When we cling to them, we suffer. When we understand their nature, we become free. The Buddha teaches that wisdom is not rejection of life, but clear seeing of its impermanent nature. Dear friends, fools flounder in this world because they mistake appearances for reality. They chase what cannot be held and fear what cannot be avoided. The wise, however, understand that everything conditioned is changing. They live in the world but are not trapped by it. They use things without being used by craving. Dear friends, there was a monk who once lived in a palace before renouncing the world. After becoming a monk, he sometimes remembered his past life and felt a subtle longing. The Buddha gently reminded him that both palace and forest are part of the same changing world. Understanding this, the monk let go of nostalgia and deepened his practice. He realized that freedom is not about location, but about the mind's attachment or non-attachment. Dear friends, the teaching of this verse also helps us face uncertainty in life. When conditions change unexpectedly, The mind that clings suffers greatly. But the mind trained in awareness responds with balance. It sees change as natural rather than personal failure. This understanding brings great peace in times of difficulty. Dear friends, may we learn to observe life as it truly is, like a moving chariot decorated with passing experiences. May we not be deceived by appearances or trapped by desires. May wisdom guide our perception so that we live in the world with clarity and freedom. Dear friends, as we conclude this reflection, let us remember that liberation is not found in controlling the world but in understanding it. When the mind no longer clings, suffering naturally ceases. When awareness is present, life becomes simple and clear. This is the path taught by the Buddha. Dear friends, before we fully conclude this reflection, let us once more gently return to the essence of the Buddha's teaching in this verse. The world appears like a grand and ornamented royal chariot, full of movement, beauty, and constant transformation. Everything within it is in motion, nothing remains fixed, and nothing can be held permanently. When the mind forgets this truth, it becomes entangled in chasing, grasping, and resisting. When the mind remembers this truth, it becomes spacious, peaceful, and free. Dear friends, we can observe directly in our daily experience that every moment is changing. The body changes from youth to age. Emotions arise and pass away. Thoughts appear and disappear without control. Even relationships evolve according to conditions. When we cling to any of these as permanent, suffering naturally arises. But when we understand their nature as changing processes, we begin to live with greater ease and acceptance. This is the beginning of wisdom as taught by the Buddha. Dear friends, there was once an old practitioner who spent many years trying to find stability in the external world. He built plans, expectations, and attachments around his family, his possessions, and his identity. Yet over time he experienced repeated loss and change. At first he resisted these changes and suffered greatly. Later, after hearing the Dharma, he began to reflect more deeply on impermanence. He realized that what he had been trying to hold on to was always already changing. This realization did not make him despair. Instead, it brought him a quiet strength and acceptance that he had never known before. Dear friends, another practitioner described how he used to be constantly disturbed by desire. Whenever something pleasant appeared, he would chase after it. Whenever something unpleasant appeared, he would push it away. This constant movement created restlessness in his mind. After learning to observe the nature of experience more closely, he noticed that both pleasure and pain were temporary. Neither stayed, neither belonged to him, and neither could be controlled. In this understanding, his mind began to settle naturally, no longer driven by endless pursuit or resistance. Dear friends, the Buddha does not ask us to reject the world, but to see it clearly. Seeing clearly means recognizing that everything conditioned is impermanent and interdependent. When this is understood, the grip of attachment naturally loosens. We no longer need to fight with experience or cling to it. Instead, we can live with openness, responding to life with clarity rather than reaction. Dear friends, this clarity brings great compassion. When we see that all beings are also moving within this same changing world, often unaware of its impermanent nature, compassion arises naturally. We begin to understand that suffering is not personal failure, but misunderstanding of reality. This understanding softens judgment and increases kindness toward ourselves and others. Dear friends, even in simple daily moments we can practice this awareness. When walking, we can know we are walking. When speaking, we can know we are speaking. When thinking, we can know thoughts are arising and passing. This gentle awareness does not require force. It only requires remembering to return again and again to the present moment. Dear friends, as we continue this path, we gradually discover that peace is not something we need to create. It is already present when the mind is not entangled in grasping. The more we understand the nature of the world as impermanent and insubstantial, the more natural peace becomes. This is the fruit of wisdom described in the teaching of the Buddha. Dear friends, may we carry this understanding into every aspect of our lives. May we see the world clearly without distortion. May we live with awareness rather than distraction. May we walk gently through this changing world with a heart that is free from unnecessary attachment. Dear friends, As we continue further into this contemplation, we look again at how deeply the Buddha's teaching penetrates ordinary perception. The ornamented royal chariot is not only something we see outside in the world, but also something we construct within the mind. Each moment of thought decorates experience with meaning, judgment, desire, or fear. In this way, the mind itself becomes the builder of the chariot it then becomes attached to. When this is not seen clearly, suffering continues. When this is seen clearly, freedom naturally arises. Dear friends, there was once a contemplative who noticed how quickly his mind created stories about every experience. A sound would arise, and immediately a story about it would form. A feeling would arise, and immediately a story about it would follow. Over time, he realized that he was not only experiencing life, but also constantly interpreting it. During deep reflection, he began to separate direct experience from mental narration. What remained was simple awareness, uncluttered and peaceful. In that simplicity, the weight of mental construction gradually dissolved. Dear friends, this is the heart of Buddhist insight practice, to see clearly without adding unnecessary fabrication. The world does not need to be changed in order for peace to arise. What needs to be understood is the habit of grasping and elaboration within the mind. When the mind stops building upon experience, experience reveals its natural simplicity. In that simplicity, suffering loses its foundation. Dear friends, another practitioner once described his realization as if a heavy burden had been placed down. He had spent many years trying to control circumstances so that life would feel secure. Yet the more he tried to control, the more anxious he became. Eventually, he saw that control itself was based on fear of impermanence. When he understood that impermanence is not a mistake, but the nature of reality, his resistance softened. He began to live with trust and awareness rather than control over outcomes. Dear friends, the Buddha's teaching invites us to rest in this awareness that does not cling. This awareness is not separate from life. It is the clear knowing of life as it unfolds. When joy arises, awareness knows joy. When sorrow arises, awareness knows sorrow. When confusion arises, awareness knows confusion. In this knowing, there is space, and in that space, there is freedom. Dear friends, as we deepen this understanding, we begin to see that the ornamented chariot is constantly passing. No single moment remains fixed. Even the sense of I is part of this movement, arising and passing along with all other phenomena. When identification weakens, the mind becomes less burdened. When burden is released, natural compassion and clarity emerge. Dear friends, let us continue to cultivate this gentle observation in every aspect of life. Let us see clearly without distortion, live simply without grasping, and walk this path with patience and kindness toward ourselves and others. Thank you for watching my video. Namalamat Ba. I wish to bring this merit towards all disciples and sentient beings, all of whom will attain Buddhahood. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I really appreciate your time.